January 27th, Andy McQuitty. Sometimes we fight fierce battles of faith, not for the outcome, but for the journey. One typical Tuesday afternoon, Pastor Andy McQuitty sat at his desk, minding church business and looking forward to his Saturday golf game, when the phone rang. It was his doctor. "Andy, you have a massive tumor that has broken through the wall of your colon. It's cancer. It's serious. Get here now." The next moment, my business had changed from leading a church to battling cancer, and I wound up not playing golf, but donating 12 inches of my colon to medical science, said Andy. That was a triple bogey I had not anticipated. At first, why me was at the top of the long list of questions Andy had for the Almighty. Why this? Why now? Was it something I did? Something I failed to do? As Andy faced the reality of an 8% chance of survival, uncertainty, anger, and misery became familiar acquaintances. My prayers were brutally honest, Andy said. They contained a whole lot less about what I knew. God is great, God is good, and a whole lot more of what I felt. God is deaf, God is gone. Wrestling with fear and doubt, Andy learned how important it was for a man to lament, to mourn, to express grief and sorrow like Job. Andy discovered that honesty with pain and honesty with God were vital parts of his journey. He discovered that we can allow ourselves to ask the tough questions. God doesn't mind our honesty. In fact, this kind of honesty leads us to trust God's purposes for our lives. Andy said, "When we ask the question honestly and authentically, I believe we are given the grace to be able to change the question from why me to why not me?" Andy began to understand his unfolding story, that a walk with Christ is not ultimately about our happiness and comfort. The purpose of life for a Christ follower, Andy said, is ultimately not to never die, but rather to fulfill completely His purposes for us. As he discovered that God was still with him in the journey, that God had not abandoned him in this crisis, Andy was able to see beyond his own feelings about his suffering. He was able to embrace the reality that God had a greater purpose for this unexpected disaster. Every word he had preached from the pulpit for years was suddenly on trial, and as a temporary resident of the Valley of the Shadow of Death, he found what he had preached to be true as ever. God had not changed, truth had not changed, only Andy's circumstances had changed. Andy's experience sounds a lot like 1 Peter 4, verses 1 and 2, which says, "Since Christ suffered in the flesh, you also arm yourselves with the same attitude, because the one who has suffered in the flesh has finished with sin, in that he spends the rest of his time on earth concerned about the will of God and not human desires." On the other side of the battle, Andy could say, suffering in and of itself is a gnarly, unattractive business, but dedicated to God, it produces good and beautiful things. How can you reframe your crisis in a way that would help you think more like Jesus and pursue His purposes for your life? Sometimes we fight fierce battles of faith, not for the outcome, but for the journey.
Hello, my name is Jerry Nichols, and I'm the CEO of Lighthouse Power Business, and I've been asked to do the daily challenge for January 27th. And in this daily podcast that you listen to, you're going to hear the questions of why me? Why now? Why? And I'm going to challenge you to think about when circumstances overwhelm you and you want to ask that question, why? That question, why, is a slippery slope because it challenges God. I would challenge you to, instead of asking why, asking who, asking what, asking how. That allows us to be in submission to God. There is a reason why things are happening, but if we demand a why, we're challenging God. And I would encourage you to, instead, when suffering or when circumstances come forward that are overwhelming, that you ask, who do you want me to be? What do you want me to learn from this? How do you want me to respond? Instead of why. Why allows you to take the place of God, but when you say, who do you want me to be? What do you want me to learn? How do you want me to respond? That allows you to take this circumstance, this suffering, and allows you to move beyond it in the power of your God and for your benefit. It allows you to move forward. So take that to heart and ask not why, but ask who do you want me to be? How do you want me to respond? What do you want me to do? Thank you for listening, and Godspeed.